then also how do we incentivize people who may not have had access to these kinds of solutions? I mean, this could be maybe an equitable way of creating a tax incentive, like a credit, could be to prioritize, low-income households to be eligible for those, or that kind of a thing.
I would also want to put an emphasis on some of the commercial scales, because I think that more of the water saving needs to happen in landscaping and parks and golf courses, and not just have the emphasis be on households, because we know that domestic water conservation is important, but we also know that so much more of it, I think, maybe comes from landscaping, and so to not leave out the private land spaces in the proposal.
Water uses in California, it goes to agriculture, and just looking at a lot of these, they're very urban issues, and I know there's not a lot of large scale agriculture going on here in Oakland in the boundaries, but all our food comes from these areas, and we need to be looking at how, I guess this is more of a concern than how droughts will affect our agriculture, and then how that ties back to like rising food prices that lots of people have been talking about earlier today.
Just to tie in those two pieces of what was being said right there, in agriculture, it's disincentivized to conserve water in California generally. The price that a farmer who's irrigating 1,000 acres of almonds in the Central Valley pays for water is much different than the price that you and I pay at home. And so there's little bottom line effect for them to implement a strategy that makes 5% water savings or 20% water savings. Even though those strategies are out there, it's not a priority for most farmers at this stage.
So it's sort of like pricing for water use, like large-scale water users.
This, I think, goes along with addressing the commercial water uses in a different bracket somehow, and not one that treats them as bulk purchasers, and therefore it's easier to get them the water. I think that's a kind of a fallacy. What's that? Sure. But if you're actually implementing strategies that are saving them water, and then if you can save 20% of the water and the cost of water is 4 times what it is now, you're going to make an impact on the bottom line that affects a change across the whole industry, because people will respond to that. I mean, eventually in the long run.
And maybe one of the proposals could be to, in the same way that we're incentivizing different systems for houses to help them do water conservation. I think whether it's a small farmer or a medium-sized farmer, or even the big farmers, they're going to demand some help in getting those systems in place, which are expensive, to conserve water. So if we have a proposal that, I don't know if it would come from the water providers or the utilities or the city governments or where that money would come from, but that there needs to be some form of assistance to help and incentivize people to put in the systems to conserve water.
Yeah. Seems like there's an underlying conversation about the carrot or the stick here too, about strategies. Just one.
So, whether we incentivize or maybe or invest in regulations or kind of enforcement of existing regulations.
Just to say, I see the benefit of incentivizing being that you don't have to fight the battle that you're talking about as much by penalizing people, but you then have to find the budget. So there's probably a hybrid solution that makes
I was just about to say, in whole systems it's not either or, it's both and, so how about a hybrid approach? That resonates with me.
And some of them are just systemic changes, like you were saying with the city of Oakland. A lot of it has to do with certain zoning or planning ordinances and whatnot that won't allow you to implement some of these measures on a household level, but then it affects the whole city. So I think that's looking at kind of barriers to some of these more natural systems that really don't require money per se, but they're just kind of institutional barriers.